this all basically broke out into the open on January 23rd in terms of I guess the question as to who is the president of Venezuela. But go back for us and just set the table because, to a certain extent, our audience in the United States, we tend to look at these issues through a rather myopic lens and the United States part in this. But this is a story that has been ongoing in Venezuela for some time, at the very least, since obviously Hugo Chavez died. But tell us, just assess for us the Maduro presidency, how it has, what its trajectory has been. And we should also state, obviously, that the problems that has happened with the Venezuelan economy have been exacerbated by the United States and others' policy towards their participation in world markets. But fill us in on that.
Okay, well, we start with Nicolas Maduro, a long-time Chavista, very loyal to his boss, was anointed as Chavez's successor effectively when Chavez departed for the last time to Cuba for what turned out to be his ultimate cancer treatment before he died early in 2013. Maduro took charge, won election shortly after that by a narrow margin, and unfortunately for him, presided over the beginning of Venezuela's economic decline, which was obviously produced by the falling oil prices at the time. But I think this is crucial, we have to say, Maduro and his government have run the Venezuelan economy into the ground. I mean, their economic policy has been a disaster for many reasons. But I think one of the reasons is that Maduro had to keep the show on the road, the Chavista show, something which had been totally dominated by this hugely charismatic, figure, which was Hugo Chavez. Maduro is not as charismatic. And the way he went about keeping himself in power and holding the alliance of Chavistas together was fundamentally through corruption and paying off different parts of the military, of the political allies, and this has been the story of the last 6 years, if you like. We have seen Venezuela's economy decline by 40 to 50%. We've seen terrible hyperinflation in the last 2 years, the direct result of appalling economic mismanagement. And we've seen at the same time politically the opposition, which had really been buried under Hugo Chavez, who was, just a serial election victor, enormously popular in the country. The opposition has come back, restored itself, cleaned itself up, won elections to the National Assembly in 2015, and then as it started, preparing itself to, finally dislodge Chavismo from power, that is when the political repression began, and the government, alas, became ever more authoritarian, resulting in the elections, the very disputed elections of May last year.
Okay, and just give us a sense. I mean, the economic mismanagement. They're mismanaging, obviously, the fall of global oil prices, which had propped up the economy significantly. Give us if you could, a brief survey course, though, on the. My understanding is that there were implications to lines of credit that were denied the Venezuelan government and caused deeper corruption because of what could be done at that point with playing off of different currencies, particularly as related to the U.S. dollar.
Right. I'm going to put this straight. And I mean, I've been working on Venezuela for a long time, and I have had great sympathy with Hugo Chavez in his time and spoken to his ministers, visited Chavista projects. I have written about this in the past. So I want to say absolutely clear, I'm not coming at it with an ideological bias or a prejudice. I'm going to say it as it was. There are two sorts of sanctions which the United States has brought against Venezuela. Targeted sanctions against government leaders, asset freezes, travel bans, the usual, which now cover a lot of government leaders, but doesn't really have economic effects on the Venezuelan people, and financial sanctions introduced in August 2017. Now, a lot of blame has been put on those from certain sectors, and it's true that they did restrict credit lines to Venezuelan companies and for oil purchases. So it rather, reduced the room for maneuver. And you will speak to senior US government officials and they will admit there's been over-compliance with those sanctions, so that, any dealing with a Venezuelan company which involves a US bank or a financial transaction of some sort comes in for particular scrutiny. And that wasn't the initial intention of those sanctions. But I want to be absolutely clear. The Venezuelan economic disaster had gestated well before those sanctions were introduced. The emigration was already beginning. The inflation was already rocketing. The imports of food and medicine on which people depended were already collapsing. All of that was well underway. If you look at the poverty rates in Venezuela, the increase in the number of poor people from 2013, 14 till 17 was absolutely huge before the sanctions. There's no doubt the sanctions have had an effect, a chilling effect, and they particularly hit the oil industry, which has collapsed in the last year or so. But I think if you are looking for a general understanding of where the Venezuelan economy went wrong, you've just got to look at price controls, distortions, expropriations, and a very lamentable, manipulation of the currency, which was effectively used by people close to the regime to make vast amounts of illicit money.
Right. Okay. And so, we got to take a break in about 2 minutes. But before we do, give us a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about, and you've alluded to it a little bit, but when we talk about an economy that has really just crashed. It's just imploded.
Yes.
What does it mean on the ground? Like, how do Venezuelans and give us a sense across the income spectrum, how do they experience it?
Well, what we mean by this is that you have a minimum wage, and that's because of the constant hyperinflation and constant devaluation of the currency has been, rocking around $5 or $6 up and down according to how the currency is faring at any given moment over the last 2 years. So that's dollar terms. Obviously, food is a bit cheaper in Venezuela, but not considerably. And it means that access to all those goods which are imported, and huge numbers of goods are imported. This is an oil state. It's traditionally imported, most food and other goods. It means that access to those is very limited, indeed. So what do you see? How does it affect the people? Well, I can speak from a number of different places here. You go to the border, Cucuta, the Colombian border town with Venezuela, and you see the families who are bringing all their possessions, leaving Venezuela. And you see some terrible things. What can I say? You see children, 1-year-old children with their feet all bent because of rickets, which, if I'm not mistaken, is due to a lack of protein consumption in their first few months of life. You see regularly people who have just consuming less than they need to be able to eat. If you go down into the far south of the country, in Amazonas or Bolivar state, the stories of just the compromises and the way people have to shut up and keep quiet to receive the food rations, the clap boxes, which they receive from local state authorities, and all the sorts of forms of poverty you can mention. The one thing which nobody lacks until there are occasional shortages is petrol, gas, because it's so phenomenally cheap. It's still, even despite all the massive inflation, it's still kept at a sort of subsidized rate of less than pennies, less than cents. In fact, I saw one estimate recently that you could fill 11 Olympic-sized swimming pools with petrol bought with $1. in Venezuela at the moment. So, I mean, this is just an example of the economic distortions. Overall, you see the effects. Now, I think the point you're also raising here is, how is it affecting the richer people? Well,
I'll tell you what, Ivan. Let's take a quick break here. When we come back, yes, let's talk about how it's affecting the wealthy as well in Venezuela, and then let's talk about the move by Juan Guaido to attempt to assume the presidency. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. I'm talking to Ivan Briscoe. We'll be right back in just a moment.